Let's bring in Sahar Khamis, a senior fellow with the Middle East Council on Global Affairs, and she's joining us live from Washington, D.C. Thank you very much for your time. Pressure on the Biden administration to change course from Arab, from Muslim allies. Is it susceptible to this pressure? Just how closely will the U.S. president, will the U.S. administration be watching what's come out of the summit in Riyadh?
Thank you for having me. I think that the summit stopped short of taking some really aggressive, strong and vital recommendations, such as, for example, severing or stopping all kinds of diplomatic and economic ties with Israel, stopping all flights to and from Israel to the region, using oil as a leverage. There are certain things that could have been coming out of this summit that unfortunately did not come out of it. So for many people who are monitoring it, it's like too little, too late, to say the least. There's not really something that came out of that would be decisive or vital in terms of changing the course of action. Yes, there was, of course, condemnation of Israeli actions in Gaza, description of these actions as, very much against humanity, and also saying that they went far beyond self-defense levels. All of that is great, but at the same time, I think more was expected to come out of that particular summit, and there seems to be some divisions internally and differences between members of the Arab League and Islamic nations on that particular issue. So that has been masked with some kind of statement that did not really deliver much.
Ms. Khamis, why do you think that the leaders didn't take the steps that you're referring to, whether it's, cutting economic ties, imposing sanctions, using the leverage they have as oil-producing nations? Is it because there isn't unity? There were more than 50 nations who were attending.
Correct, but there are some nations that actually have already normalization and have diplomatic ties with Israel, such as Egypt, such as Jordan, United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, and of course the host country, Saudi Arabia, does not have diplomatic relationships or normalization with Israel. We know that that was on the agenda and it was supposed to happen, and then it was disrupted by the October 7th events and everything that unfolded afterwards, including the very aggressive attack on Gaza. So that file is now on hold. But the host country itself, Saudi Arabia, and these countries I mentioned, along with other countries like Sudan, Mauritania, Djibouti, and others, took a position really to kind of, sabotage the effort to come up with more decisive, more strong, more firm action that could have really tilted the balance and shifted it in the favor of the Palestinian people who are suffering daily in Gaza. That unfortunately did not happen. So that's why for some people who are monitoring it, it was a disappointment. But coming back to your question about the United States and whether the U.S. is watching all of that or not, of course, there's also a concern from the United States point of view that there is a growing opposition and growing anger in the Arab streets, in the Middle Eastern streets, and internationally and globally against the United States policy in this particular sensitive and humanitarian issue. And there have been reports coming out of the, the American embassy in the Sultanate of Oman saying that if the United States does not change course of action, it's going to raise anger and hostility among generations of Arabs to come.
And when you talk about the Palestinian suffering, as you're speaking, we are looking at pictures from Gaza City with flares that are lighting up the night sky. And we can hear very loud explosions, which we have been hearing almost non-stop for the last few hours now. And we know that with those explosions, as the fighting continues between Israeli soldiers, there is now a ground operation taking place by Israeli soldiers against Palestinian fighters. But also with these explosions, the civilian death toll rises. There are already more than 11,000 people who have lost their lives in Gaza, and the U.S. president has said that after weeks of saying that they weren't going to call for a ceasefire to stop the Israeli attacks, the U.S. president has now said that they do want a ceasefire, that the Israeli prime minister won't agree to one. But do you think that the U.S. president, that Joe Biden, is using all the leverage that the U.S. has, the great leverage that the U.S. has with Israel? And is he out of step with what Americans want? There is a new poll from the Data for Progress, which shows that 80% of Democrats, 80% of his own party, 56% of Republicans and 57% of independents believe the U.S. should call for a ceasefire.
Absolutely. I think almost 500,000 protesters who really swamped the streets of Washington, D.C. here and other cities around the United States, not to mention other cities in Europe and in the Arab world and around the world at large, are sending a very, very clear message that Joe Biden has to take action. His administration has to stop all of this kind of aggression against unarmed, civilians in Gaza. And until he listens, I think that his reputation internationally and that of the United States is very much at stake. There is a lot of diplomats and political analysts who are saying, hey, you really have to take action on that particular issue, and you have to do that now, right now. Enough is enough. You cannot just wait another day as more thousands and thousands of civilians and children are being killed. Elizabeth, I want to remind you, in 2003, when there was a lie about the Iraqi troops, pulling the babies out of the incubators, you might remember that, and that was one of the reasons for the American invasion of Iraq. It turned out to be a lie. Now we are not witnessing a lie. We are witnessing a reality where babies are dying inside incubators in Gaza hospitals, and nobody is paying attention. The world is looking the other way. The American administration is looking the other way and is not lifting a finger to try to save these babies in the incubators. That is double standards. That is hypocrisy.
Ms. Khamis, thank you very much for your analysis on this. That is Sahar Khamis joining us live from Washington, D.C. She was talking to us about the 37 newborn babies who are in Al-Shifa Hospital. They have been taken out of incubators because there is no electricity to run those incubators. And the fighting that we are seeing pictures of, the flares lighting up the night sky over Gaza City, that you can see the very loud explosions, that is taking place around Al-Shifa Hospital, Gaza's largest hospital, where much of its functioning has stopped. And this is the fighting that is coming closer and closer to Al-Shifa Hospital, which has been repeatedly attacked over the past month.